Me the question.
Yeah, what's one thing that you wish you knew before we got married about money within our relationship?
What's one thing I wish I knew before we got married?
Yeah, it could be like something you wish that I knew, or something you wish like you would have been like aware of, before you actually were like, let's do this.
Yeah. Guys, welcome. Wanted to do something different for this Monday night live stream because I actually want to spend time with my wife on Valentine's Day. So we're recording and we're sharing this with you at the regular time. But this is my wife, Savannah, and she has, most things that you'll hear me say that sound wise have maybe in one way or another in our conversation come up, and I've gleaned it from her. And so I wanted her to be on here. One, of course, it's Valentine's Day and we're married, and I think that there's a lot of people who are in relationships, dating or married, that need to hear people talk about money.
Yeah. And they just like hearing from me.
And they and they do like hearing from Savannah. This is true. But the question she was asking me is, what's the one thing that I wish I knew? Mm-hmm. But you had something that you were going to share. You said it was what?
I think I wish that, not necessarily knew, but maybe even I wish I took more authority or confidence or whatever it was, instead of like being timid about addressing topics within money. And like, even if like maybe his pride would have got wounded, or he didn't want to hear what I had to say, like I think me just being like, hey, actually no, like this is what we're gonna do, instead of like because I trust TJ and him listening to the voice of the Lord. I trust that he listens. I also know that I hear God too, and sometimes I hear things that he doesn't hear, and vice versa. Like sometimes he hears things that I don't hear, but like eventually we end up on the same page if we're both desiring that. And I do wish though, like in the beginning of our marriage, that I was more like, okay, like, and he was very much like, show me everything, but in a way of showing me everything, but he had everything under control. And I think I wish I would have been like, actually no, like this is a better way we can do this, or this is a way that we can save money, or this is a way that we can get out of debt. This is a way that we can actually like come together as a couple, and putting all of our personal views aside about like, I was raised this way when it comes to money, or I was raised this way when it comes to money. It's like, kind of like, who cares? We're making this together as a marriage and as a couple, and what does that look like? So for sure, for me, I wish I would have been more just confident and been like, actually, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I know what works and what doesn't work, and like he has something to add and I have something to add, and just like speaking up is something I wish I did.
Yeah, and I think for me, the background is somebody from my position is almost the opposite. So, I grew up being taught, like, learn what you need to learn, take control of a situation, and be confident and ask questions when you need to. And you should be able to develop some level of independence. And especially as a man, there's this 100%. Element that I, assumed in my identity, just natural, to, okay, I'm going to provide, I'm going to do all these things. And I really just like almost took that and ran with it too far. And then I was just kind of looking back telling Savannah, hey, we're good. Like, let me just keep running. When really it was like, if I had given her the opportunity to speak into money, finances, some of those decisions, we would have made, as a couple, we would have made certain decisions differently. Now, context, coming into marriage, I had worked on Wall Street. I had left Wall Street. God gave me peace. I had a promotion, God gave me peace, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense, but this is what I'm doing. So I've done that. In my walk with God, that's what that looked like, is I was developing a relationship where I was trusting him with big things in my life. And to me, that was big. It was reputation. Mm-hmm. So I was also, as a function of that, seeing implications financially. And so I was having to realize, like, I need to take control of certain things. And this was the first time I was navigating that. When I met Savannah, I was in the middle of navigating that and in the middle of actually learning to hear God's voice. So God's voice and learning to hear his voice and money were connected, because I was actually learning to hear his voice with regards to the topic of money and profession and next steps and all these things. I ended up losing a bunch of money. I ended up going broke while we started dating.
Yeah.
So I share all that to say we came into marriage. I took on debt. I developed some really terrible agreements in the way that I thought about debt based on what I'd been taught. But guess what? Like, I was the one I went to college. I got a degree in finance. I went to Wall Street, so I had all these things in my head that were telling me like, oh, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
And as a result, what does that do? That creates pride. And knowing that I have a gift to be commercial and to create wealth, I thought to myself, okay, well, it's going to be no problem. It's just a matter of time before we're able to get out of debt or do this thing or grow that. And what we kept running into is actually it was not so much about the wealth creation. It was more about the practical wisdom on making financial decisions together. That, was then, because I lacked certain wisdom you had, and because I didn't invite you in, which is what you were saying. You were saying, I wish I was more confident to step in, but I should have also been more open and more inviting into, despite the fact that I'm transparent.
Yeah.
I was not giving you this door saying, hey, walk into this.
Permission.
Right. There wasn't permission. So I was transparent, but there wasn't permission. Those are two very different things, right? But it's almost like it allowed me to live this lie that I was making decisions with my wife. And, a real practical is like, we talked about anything over, what was it, $1,000 we agreed to together. And for me, I like to make decisions quicker, and you like to be patient and take your time. And that's a really healthy balance. As I would invite you into those decisions where it was over $1,000, I would notice that I would get impatient.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time I actually booked a hotel that was like
so bad. It was so
3x.
Expensive. It was bad. It was bad.
3x. So if it was $100, it was $300. If it was $1,000, it was $3,000, right? So anyway, I booked a hotel that was 3x what we ended up paying for the whole trip. Just the hotel itself was 3x. And I remember we'd spent all night trying to find a place to get away. And I was just like, I don't have any space to make decisions anymore. My intention tonight was inviting you in so I could make a decision, not so I could sleep on it and make a decision tomorrow. And so I just made the decision. And Savannah, I shared that with her as she had gone to get a cup of tea or something. I'm like, great, we're all done. And she's like, wait, what do you mean we're done? I didn't decide on that. And fast forward, I ended up having to call this hotel that didn't take any, that didn't give you any refunds. And I pleaded with them. I was like, hey, I made a decision without my wife. It's not good. Is there any way you guys can give us a refund? And thankfully, because it was in such a short time, they did. But I mean, it was a significant, the alternative, what we ended up paying for was only, maybe $100 some a night. And
so much cheaper.
Right. And what I was looking at was so much more expensive, but I was just...
And it's not about cheap versus expensive. It's more about what can you do within your means at that time and what's necessary. Is it worth, spending X amount on this versus maybe something else? Or so if you want to spend $3,000 on a hotel, go for it, as long as you can do that.
and we couldn't
no.
In my head. But here's the thing, in my head it was the exhaustion of decisions and all of these things, and this lie around wealth creation. It's okay, well, we've been able to do this at this growth rate, and therefore in the future we'll be able to do that. And what I kept running into is we'd be able to make progress, and then we'd be set back. And so we'd take 3 steps forward and 4 steps back. And that kept happening. And over time, it just became exhausting to the point where I finally said to you, hey, I'm like done. Like whatever I'm doing is not working.
Yeah.
I remember I was standing in the living room and I remember looking at you and I'm going like, I literally don't know what to do. I'm telling you right now, I may have thought I had everything under control, but I don't. And that's when things changed.
Yeah.
Like a lot changed.
Yeah.
So maybe just like, what did you notice from that point once I actually gave you permission? Yes, I was transparent. I would fill you in. I would try and, share different things about what's going on financially and why this is working or that's not working. But when I actually gave you permission in my heart, like, hey, I need help and I want you to help.
It was just more about accountability to each other of like, I think asking the deeper questions of like, why do we spend money on certain things and why don't we? Or why do we make a certain amount of money and what are we going to do with it? How do we steward it? And I think the change was like just the heart posture. Like it was like something switched to where it was like, actually, no, this is about something completely different than just like making money and spending money or making money and saving money. It was like, no, actually it's like there's something more to this whole money thing as a couple. But for sure it was more about like accountability to each other of like, hey, this is actually how we want to live and not be tied to someone else or something else because we owe money, or like not be able to do the things that we feel called to do because of finances. And when we're strapped down, it makes it harder for us to like accomplish those things.
Yeah, and I mean, just like on a practical level, like I witnessed couples growing up who one would feel controlled by the other because of money. And so I think naturally what I did as a defense mechanism is I became transparent and shared everything with you, but I never wanted to be controlled in my financial decisions by you.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I came to the realization that I couldn't make the best decisions by myself. And by the way, this wasn't like I was rogue. I was asking God, like I was like, Lord, I need help.
Yeah.
Like I was like, you're helping me in this way. I don't know how I can do what I need to do in this way.
Right.
And it always came back to like you. It was like you were the it's one thing to go to God and be like, God, I need help. And it's another thing. And he's like, I gave you a wife. Like, and I kept saying that to the Lord. I was like, you gave me a wife. Like, you changed my heart. You changed so much inside. You brought me through so much healing. I've had all these things happen. Why is this part of my life being so stubborn? And I say stubborn, I didn't share a lot of context for it, but like the financial aspect, wealth creation's been great. My management of that wealth creation, very poor, for a variety of reasons. And so, as a result, I found myself just beating myself up all the time. And you were on the receiving end of that in the sense that when I'm beaten down, I don't have any emotional availability for our relationship.
Yeah. And I definitely, I could say I totally emotionally tapped out at that point. I think I was going through so much internal wrestle and then also not working myself. I was like hot mess. But like I think at that point I was like, I'm just gonna like let you do it. I kind of like disengaged because I was like, oh, you're not gonna let me in, so I'm just gonna, I think that's another reason why I wish I was like, oh, I just wish I would have snapped out of what I was in my swirl of and like just been like, no, actually, like my husband needs me by his side. I need to help him. How do I do it? Instead of being like, I'm just going to go do my thing and he can do his thing.
Yeah, because when we got married, I was locked in like, okay, I'm doing this life coaching thing. I'm growing. I'm growing a business was my mindset. I'm doing this. I'm going full steam. I just need to solve it. Business problem A, business problem B. And I kept coming back to it. And I was like, why am I not able to solve business problem A? And there were so many other things, by the way, happening on the sidelines that were actually the main event, reconnecting with biological family, going through this healing journey, all of that, getting married, moving across the country, all of that stuff. So that's happening. And we're learning how to do everything together, life together, let alone this aspect of life, money. And so I think when you put all those things in one place and you start, navigating what adjustments look like together, money was one of these ones that it just seemed like we couldn't find the adjustment we needed to make together. So health, where we live, what we do on a day-to-day basis, all these things, how we connect as a couple, what we need, all of these things we were kind of, these are adjustments we need. But for whatever reason, like money was not getting the adjustment it needed. And it started with me. It started with me not being able to give you permission or even know that was an attitude thing for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another adjustment was like the intention behind inviting God into money-making decisions was a huge change. I feel like when we were more of like, okay, like, he was always a part of it, but like I'm still relying on a lot of like my own wisdom and intellect to like guide me through, of like, I'm just gonna...
I was doing that.
But that includes both of us because we weren't doing it together. We weren't being like, let's, like, do we need to hire this person? Do we need to pay for this course? Do we need to do this thing? It's like, sometimes we would just like jump in and do it and then be like, actually, we don't need to do that quite yet. Maybe in due time, like, or maybe like, just like actually like in bigger decisions, how do we involve God into it even more in the process? I think was like a huge step for both of us together, being like, okay, like this is, we want to do this and pray and ask and like actually not rush because there's no reason to rush.
That is one thing I've learned from Savannah for sure. But something that's important is that you're hearing Savannah take responsibility for something that I feel responsible for, which is she didn't come into marriage with any debt, right? Yeah. She didn't make any decisions about putting money towards certain places where if it didn't create a return, it could put us back, right? And so when I would come to the end of the day and be like, dang, okay, there's a little bit of pressure on us because of a decision that I made. I had kind of gotten to the point where I was like, honestly, just after years and years of just trying to navigate how to figure out what adjustments need to be made, I was getting tired and it was starting to affect our relationship. But I think the thing that I didn't want to do is I didn't want to blame her because I didn't feel like she was responsible. Yet at the same time, she takes responsibility because she is in this marriage, right? And I think that's something that's super important for people to realize. It's different when you're dating than when you're married. You would not do that if we were dating.
No.
And you didn't. But when we got married, she then started realizing this is my responsibility to help my husband navigate some of these decisions.
Yeah, because that's what marriage is about. Not fully, but it's like that's a huge part of like why you're like, let's do life together. Like you make me a better person and vice versa. So it's like, and that covers in every area of your life. It's like, why hide from one of those categories? So yeah, it's whatever affects you affects me, right? Like it just, that's how it happens. And decisions, small or little, usually sometimes the small decisions are the bigger decisions. They add up, it's like no matter what they are, they affect both of us. Yeah.
I think something that's important for people to realize when it comes to just relationships and money and how money can be the obvious thing that people find to be problematic for whatever reason, whether you have much or not, or whether you don't have a lot. But I think the real key for people to understand is like people's relationship with money and decisions that they make around money are normally a function of where they're at in their heart.
Yeah. Where they're at in their heart, or generational patterns. Like, there's multiple, but for sure it definitely has to do with like your heart posture and like who's Lord of your life. Because you could have little and you could be like, no, like money doesn't own me, and it's like, actually it does, because you're consumed by it, by trying to make it, or trying to like, you know, solve all these problems in your life. Or you could have so much money that it solves all the problems in your life, when actually like it doesn't. So yes.
Yeah, I think when one of the things that I looked at prior to God really changing me, and I say that like in my mind, one of the things I looked at is I looked at my potential wife that I could be with one day, thinking, gosh, they've got to be able to make some money, because I never want to end up like blank. And I never want to be, and I thought I need to make some money because I never want to be controlled by blank. You know, and I think it's super important that my perspective changed coming into our marriage, because then I didn't, versus when we were dating, I didn't put that pressure on you to make money.
Yeah.
Whereas when we were dating, before my mind was really renewed, I was like, how are you going to show up here? What kind of weight are you going to pull? And you know, as I was really starting to go through that healing journey, having a change in my perspective, a change in my attitude, that pressure that I put on you was, I would say, removed. Like, it was removed. So that can happen in relationships where somebody does have one perspective and it changes as God changes them. But it might not happen overnight. That took me years to rewire that way of thinking. And I mean, for you, what was your perspective when you were thinking about, you know, coming into marriage and the idea of what either the husband or you were supposed to kind of do with regards to money?
Like, did I give this much thought?
Well, I mean, you said you wanted to be more confident if you could have changed one thing, right?
Yeah, I could have more confident, like, verbally and, like, communicating things.
So maybe you weren't even thinking about it.
I don't feel like I had a ton of perspective on, or, like, ton of, like, expectations on a lot of stuff when it came to money and marriage, because I feel like even with like how I was raised, I saw so many different examples of like both working, one's working, you know, like dad doesn't work, the mom works. It was like I saw like all of the above growing up, and I was kind of like, I'm okay with whatever happens. I was like, well, I believe that God provides, and I'm down to work hard, and I know you are too. So I think that's like the only thing that I saw. For sure, the pressure thing was like a challenge, I think, for me and for both of us.
The pressure I would put on myself and us because of decisions I'd make.
No, just the pressure and expectation that you were wanting someone that would work and wanting someone that would like pull their weight in a way financially. Because pulling your weight doesn't always look like financially, but
exactly right.
Yeah. So I don't think I had a crazy ton of, I didn't have expectation really when I was like, oh, like he needs to provide all the money. I was like, maybe a little bit of like, it'd be nice if you made the money, because I'm not driven by making money, and it's not really something I'm wake up every morning stoked to do. But so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I was just wondering, because I came in with that almost pressure, and then we were dating and God starts renewing my mind, and I'm like, okay, that actually doesn't have to be a thing. And then you come in with maybe like this no need to really address it because you trust work ethic, you trust God provides, and you know your decisions based on how you were able to live with little at times.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe not considering
your extravagant lifestyle,
my decisions and my growth mindset is how I
maybe that's more what we should talk about.
My extravagant lifestyle.
TJ's bougie life choices. I'm willing to drive a car that keeps breaking down on the freeway.
I definitely, now keep in mind, I didn't come from like bougie life growing up.
That doesn't mean a thing.
But I believe I have
he has great taste in things.
I like to buy.
Everyone watching this that knows TJ, a flashback is coming back. I know it.
What do you mean?
Everyone that knows you, they're watching this being like, oh, that one time we went to eat, he ordered everything on the menu. Or we went and did this and TJ just went to town. Or
and this is actually maybe a trap that another lie that can get people, especially in relationships. But I'm very generous, and generous to the point where lacking wisdom and boundaries.
Yeah.
Potentially. Have been. I'm not that way as much anymore. On a granular level, I mean, these are the things Savannah and I are talking about now. She's asked me, because of permission, but she's asked me like, hey, do we need a tip because of tip culture, or are we tipping because of,
you feel led
to purpose of a tip?
Like, yeah, it's more of like the intention.
In other words, is there like, an expectation?
Just because everyone can see the screen popping up behind you and you're like, do I feel like kind of guilty to tip, or do I just feel like I need to tip because everybody tips? Or
And for me, I'm thinking generously.
Yeah.
I always want to be generous. I never want to be the person who says I'm withholding because of A, B, and C reasons. But then as a result, you never withhold, and you don't have practical wisdom around certain things. And so.
And like, if God's like, give $100 every time you go out, do it. Then you're being obedient to his voice and you're listening to what he says. Which I know people that do that. They go out to eat, they always tip like exactly what the bill is, or double, or whatever, and it's like, that's what God's telling them to do, and they have the finances to do it. Sometimes God tells us to do stuff we don't have the finances for, which is fine, but that's just listening to his voice.
Yeah.
And not doing something because of pressure or culture or expectations but yes, it's good to ask each other questions on why we make choices that we make.
I think that's the summary of that, is like, it's not even about, is this the thing you do or don't do? I think it's about, does this person have permission to ask me?
Yeah.
And by the way, another reason why I might not have given Savannah full permission in my life in certain regards is because I'd been burned by people I'd given permission to speak into my life in certain regards.
100%.
And so naturally, I had reservation. This was not conscious to me, by the way. But I had reservation about, maybe I can't like give her full permission in this area, because then I might be exposed to pain. And again, subconscious level stuff. But that's something that came up. So yeah, as far as like some of the quiet things that might hide, and I think generosity being one of them. It's like, wow, generosity is great, but do you have boundaries? And another one was the transparency aspect. Transparency is great, but are you giving permission for your wife to ask the question? But here's the other thing. I think in the foundation is this word. I actually believe that, all things can work on this topic in particular because I trust you and you trust me. And I feel that you trust me, even if I've made poor decisions in the past. Guys, we'll all make poor decisions at some point in our lives. I'm not looking to, but we will, right? And the question is, do we learn? So I've made poor decisions in the past and I've learned from them. And that's for a whole 16-hour segment. But I really trust that Savannah's not going to bring that up in a conversation where she uses it against me. I've done that, and it's not okay. A poor decision on my part where I've used things against her from, a defensive whatever. She hasn't and doesn't do that, and I trust her. And I also trust her positioning with God, where she says, God, you're the Lord of my life, all of it. I trust that you will make decisions with wisdom to the best of your ability, and that you'll go to God if you don't know, and that you'll go to people and like learn and try and get good input and counsel.
Yep.
But ultimately, you will make your own decision. You won't just listen to somebody else because they said it.
All right.
So I trust you in that, and I think that is really the key to all of these things. Many people, I think, in relationships, one of the reasons I might not have given you permission is because I didn't fully trust you in that.
Yeah.
I didn't even have the words for it.
I don't think it was just trusting me. I think you just didn't fully trust. You just didn't trust God. Because technically you don't want to trust me anyways.
Exactly.
God says not, to do, yes, there is a level of, trust in a marriage that you want to have. But at the end of the day, it's both of you just need to be so trusting the Lord no matter what. So.
And this is something that I think is, so how do you build trust in the Lord with money individually and as a couple? I mean, for me personally, what's crazy is you're saying, hey, did you fully trust God? And yet God showed up so many times in my life between 2016 and now where guys, I would get cards in the mail with people writing checks.
No, so many miracles.
Like miracles where people were writing, people I didn't even hardly know.
Yeah.
They were like, God is, we really believe what God's doing in your life and we're glad to be a part of it. Like that is a very, I can count at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Just that. And I'm talking not small, not $100. We're talking like $2,500, $5,000, those kinds of things. So I had built this trust with God, like, God, you're real and you see my need. And I wasn't asking for any of that money, to people. So you're real and you see my need. And by the way, too, what are you trying to show me? I built that trust with him to the point where he would speak to me about something giving, and I gave to somebody once. I remember right before we got married, and I felt, a large sum of money right before we're going to get married, and it made no sense to give it on a practical level. But then I walked up to this person and I said, hey, God asked me to give you this, and they went white like a ghost, and they were like, God told me somebody was going to give me this today. And it happened to be a pastor, and they were talking about money that day, and it really changed, I think, their perspective of God and their relationship with money because of what God spoke to me and what God did that day with that decision. So I was building trust enough to give it away, to be like, God, you're giving freely, I can give freely. But yet I still didn't have enough trust to be like, I can open up my decisions to my wife and let her tell me whether something is on track, or at least invite her to ask questions. Right? Like, that's crazy that I had built that much trust where I would be willing to give away all that money for free on a word from the Lord. And yet I wouldn't be willing to invite my wife to ask a question about how I'm choosing to invest, spend, or think about money. And to me, that's telling.
That's the point, y'all. Trust God, ask questions,
and listen to your wife.
And your husband.
And your husband. No,
but even in me approaching TJ, not just coming in and being like, we need to do this, this, and this, and just telling him all the things that he did wrong. That doesn't ever go well. So don't do it. But as a wife, just coming in with I respect, I honor the fact that you've worked your butt off, you've done these things, you've made decisions for our family. He's set himself apart, just being God, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. He's done such hard work, and if I just come in and be I'm just gonna come in here and tell you all the things you did wrong, it's that just doesn't it doesn't fly well in any marriage and doesn't help either of you, because that's me just being prideful and being like, oh, you did all these things, but you screwed up in this, just if you do approach your husband, just love them so well in the process of like correcting.
Yeah. I think when that's practical for anything, not just money, but when you're thinking about how to approach your significant other, whether you're dating or married, when you're thinking about approaching them, it never works to approach them with all the things they're doing wrong. Like leading with honor and honoring what they're doing right and recognizing what they're doing right. I mean, think about the baby that's learning how to walk. You don't beat them down because they fell. You help them pick them back up and say, you're doing so good, take another step forward.
Yeah.
Right. And I think in certain areas of our lives, we're babies. And Savannah had to recognize maybe where I was at in this area, in that area, in that area, in that area. And same with me to her.
Yeah.
And we have to say, oh, maybe they're still developing in this area and learning or unlearning, but learning the ways of God. And the practicals, the principles that are applied, because they have some of it right, but some of it is just a little off and it's taken us off course a different way that we don't want to be going together. And that was where, that was where and has where we've been. But in the last, I'd call it year especially, we've really seen like a change and had miracles happen as well. With regards to that. So maybe like the last thing that that we can talk about is just as people are thinking about, as they're thinking about how to navigate maybe two very, very, very different views of how money ought to be kind of like talked about. I don't know if there's practicals. I try and think about practicals to end on because I just think that that's really helpful. Totally. So
I think you already kind of named one, but just even like how to approach, how to talk about it. Like a big practical is like, hey, if there's an elephant in the room, like address it. Like don't wait 5 years to talk about it. Like it's just not going to be worth the wait. So I think that's one practical thing. It's just like get wisdom, get counsel. Maybe bring other people in if like it's too hard for you two to talk about it yourselves, just like, hey, we need to talk to somebody about our finances. Like we are in over our head. Like,
and no shame, by the way, like there's no shame about that. But also I TJ personally recognize how hard it is to find people that you can like connect with about this. Cause some people you go to, it's like all they want to do is talk about you need to be debt free, you need to be debt free, you need to be debt free. And it's like, hold on, let's talk about the thing over here that is the thing behind the whole debt free thing.
Yeah.
Right? Or you need to be saving, you need to be, and it's like, it's so hard to find those people to actually receive counsel from. But when you do invite somebody else in, trusted friends, trusted people where you've seen it modeled well in their life.
Yeah.
You can go into that discussion where you say, I am here to receive what I can receive from them. I don't have to take everything that they're saying, right? But I know that we need some kind of help, and one step forward is better than zero. And I mean, frankly, that's been a hard one for me, finding those right people. And God has honestly just like brought them.
Yeah.
So I think the another practical is like, actually ask God for help. Like, God, I need people, the right people who understand my heart, who understand the practicals and principles, who have modeled this, and who can actually, who are empowered to help. Because there's a lot of people who model something, but they're not empowered to really help other people. So I think asking God would be another one, just a really practical, like, Lord.
Definitely your first one, just asking him questions, being like, hey, like, is my heart posture right with money? Just starting with there. Just being like, is money Lord of my life, or are you? individually and together.
Yeah. And this is also like multiple, it doesn't have to be a weekend retreat. It doesn't have to be, a 6-hour thing. It can be something that you just start as a conversation and continue dialogue in with, your significant other. And it is something that's really important to get on the same page and have agreement in. Practical when you find, I remember asking your dad this once, and you learned it from him, but you guys had so much wisdom in how you managed money. Like whatever you had, lots or little.
Right.
So what were maybe a couple principles that he taught you about how you manage money, or even that you've just applied yourself?
I think the number one is like spend what you have. Like we grew up in credit card culture. Like everyone's getting credit cards at like 20, 17, 18, like super young, not knowing how to manage it. Everyone's just swiping because they can. So I think for sure, like if you are going to go into credit cards, because they're great if you know how to manage them. That's like a super practical one, is just being like, okay, I spent this, I'm going to pay it off right away. Just like I only spend what's in my actual bank account. I think is probably like the first. I'm trying to think of other ones. I think of that, and then I think of generosity. I think like even when you don't have a lot, it's just like being like this with everything God gives you, and just being like, okay, you know what, Lord, like this is all I have in my bank account, but you're telling me to do this, I'm going to do it. So I might not be able to go to that movie, or I might not be able to like take that trip I want to take, or I could actually just like pay for someone's meal, or like, I don't know, just sometimes God's just always wanting to work on our heart more than us being fed entertainment.
When it comes to the idea of like heart posture, I think it's really important for different ways of hearing that, so you can really connect with it. Attitude, simple small things like, when I go to the store, do I need that big one or the small one?
Right.
God told me once, he said, whatever you don't spend, I will multiply in returns. And this was recently, in the last like 6 months. And that actually really changed how I thought about making purchases of anything. And so even, guys, I'm talking even down to like a cup of coffee, certain things. I'm not Mr. Budget guy. Like, I honestly hate budgets. I am so intensely focused on revenues, income streams, but I'm less focused on expenses. I think about it more broadly.
The prices of 2 different apples versus...
Correct. And I could go into a whole thing about why.
Yeah.
But God has shown me how much wisdom there is to seeing expenses as a way to actually grow revenue. And I say grow revenue, it not directly, but I used to think about, when you're managing expenses, then you're just restricting. And it's actually like, no, you're actually creating an opportunity for increasing, So for me, I think that's been a real helpful shift, is for somebody who's very growth-minded to be applying what Savannah's saying in the context of how you think already. It's like God made her growth-minded too, but like not in the same way that I am. But what she's saying can be applied in the ways that I'm thinking to motivate me. She's not asking me to change who I am. She's asking me to make different decisions, and I'm thinking to motivate myself. How can I make these decisions and have more wisdom? And I just want to think about it in the ways I already think. Like, I'm growth-minded, so this is not restricting. This is actually helping me grow. And so I think if you can not look to try and change everything about yourself, but if you can understand how you're made, and you can say, okay, now God, in the ways that I'm made, what does wisdom look like?
Right.
I think that can be really helpful for somebody who might struggle with the other person being very having wisdom but not knowing how to apply their wisdom in the ways that you want to. So I'd say typically if I were to summarize relationships and what you typically see happen, this is not everyone, but one person's normally got something the other person doesn't.
Right.
And it's like, how do you make those two things together? One. That would be the goal, and hoping that you guys, even just walking away from this, whether you're watching or listening, that you guys will be able to help become a little bit more one, whether you're, in the process of, in your dating or married or even single and you haven't approached this topic yet, but maybe some nuggets for your future.
Oh, super good.
Anything else? We love you guys. Thank you. And if you do get value, please hit subscribe, share with somebody, and would just, we welcome you guys to just help us let others know that this is available to them through things like subscribing or leaving a comment and just letting us know what resonates with you. That's also helpful. If you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. If you're watching on Valentine's Day, happy Valentine's Day. You guys should read about the story of what Valentine's Day actually is. It's very inspiring.
Happy Valentine's Day.